I really feel like I missed an assignment in not wearing a cowboy hat when I did this video, but anyway, we're going to be talking about if you should move to Alaska if you are currently living in Texas. As somebody who did spend a number of years going to school in Texas, I can speak to a lot of people who are currently living in the Lone Star State as to what the appeal of Alaska is going to be for you. And if you're coming from a state that is not Texas, do not worry. You can still come here as well. Before we get jumping into that, though, my name is Jamin Goecker. I'm an associate real estate broker in the state of Alaska, and my mission is to help you to build an intentional and significant legacy for yourself and your family by coaching in real estate. Now, let's go and jump into today's video. All right, one of the big reasons that people would consider moving to Alaska from Texas is because of the heat. Like, this is not anything that should be a surprise. It is hot in Texas, regardless what part of Texas that you're in. The only difference is it humid hot or is it dry hot? And luckily for me, most of my time in Texas, I was in San Angelo, so kind of West Texas, and it was more or less kind of the dry hot, but still it was hot. Like, I remember one season I was really getting into the shape for the cross country and track at Angelo State University, and I ran, oh gosh, it must have been like 1,000 or so miles that summer. It was a lot to begin with, but then also we set a record that summer for the most days over, I think it was like 100, 110 degrees or something like that. So it was ridiculously hot. So yes, I definitely do get the appeal if you're from Texas thinking about moving to Alaska, because it's going to be significantly cooler up here. The temperature in the summertime is usually going to be around, I'd say about low mid 50s, like up to about 70. Maybe you'll get to 80 a couple of times. Those times are going to be kind of few and far between, and then it kind of starts tapering off around August and gets to more like the rainy season, and then it starts getting cold. Well, how cold? Well, I'm sure we'll talk about that further on in this video. Another really big benefit of moving to Alaska from Texas is if you are trying to get away from the oppressive sun, because if you are in Texas, like, it is beating down on you. Like, it's going to be hot, yes, and then it's just going to be bright. So bright down there, and that's something that you kind of get used to, but you kind of don't. And luckily up here in Alaska, the sun is not going to just be so bright that it's not blinding all the time. So that's another big reason that you should move to Alaska from Texas. Third reason that you should move to Alaska from Texas is that up here in Alaska, we actually have scenery. And no, I don't consider your little rolling hills in east part of Texas as scenery. It's just, you need to, if that's scenery, then you poor child, bless your heart, you need to come up here to Alaska and see what actual mountains and forests and rivers and glaciers and just the absolute raw beauty of the uncut frontier actually does look like. And if you're still not convinced, okay, that's fine. Different strokes for different folks, but you will definitely come away with a better appreciation for the beauty that the world has to offer. Fourth reason that you should move to Alaska from Texas is that in Alaska, we do not have tornadoes that I'm aware of. As far as I know, we've never had a tornado on record in Alaska. That's not our thing. We're more into like earthquakes and stuff like that. Maybe an occasional tsunami, but tornadoes, that's just not something that we're really into. So if you're tired of living in Tornado Alley or being Tornado Alley adjacent, then Alaska is definitely a place you should consider. All right, this next one is really kind of a big one for me, and that is there are no snakes in Alaska, and there's going to be nowhere near as many insects in Alaska as there's going to be in Texas. So yeah, this one's really a big one for me. I don't like snakes, especially rattlesnakes. At least rattlesnakes have the decency to give you some kind of a warning. Other poisonous snakes like water moccasins and whatever other snakes are down there, I don't know. They're all hellish to me. Whatever there are, they not up here in Alaska. And there's certainly going to be some insects up here in Alaska, but it's mostly going to be like mosquitoes in that variety. So you're not dealing with scorpions or a bunch of other things that can mess you up. Now, I am going to go out on a limb here and say that if you are from Texas, if there's a good chance you live in one of the bigger metropolitan areas, and if that is the case, you're probably used to having a really long commute time and where it is just bumper to bumper traffic, and that's just life. unfortunately, that's just a reality of the situation. You need to do that. Up here in Alaska, though, the furthest you might commute might be like 40, 50 minutes or so one way. But the good news about that is most of that driving is just going to be open highway. It's very rare you get into any kind of a bumper-to-bumper traffic scenario. And even if you do, it's usually like 3, maybe 4 traffic light cycles before you get through it. So you're going to get up here, and if you hear Alaskans complaining about commuting and traffic, you're probably going to laugh. Okay, I know I did. All right, last but not least, like Texas, there is no income tax up here in Alaska. There's also no estate tax or no inheritance tax as well. Property taxes might be a little bit higher, but once you counteract that with receiving money from the permanent fund dividend after you've lived here for a couple of years, you can see how that all just kind of balances out a little bit, and it's a huge value add for you that you're actually moving to another state that doesn't have income tax, because that really is kind of the big difference maker for a lot of people. Let's go and take a break real quick here. If you are considering moving to Alaska, I do have a podcast, whether you are from Texas or not, talking about where I've actually gone and interviewed people who've recently moved to the state and talk about their experiences, what they like about the state, what they don't like, what their tips and tricks were for other people who were coming up here in the near future. So if that's something that would benefit you, do make sure you go check that out in the description section down below, and I'll have a link going directly to that podcast. And also, every episode I do highlight one comment from the comment section and go ahead and respond to that. And today, let's go ahead and take a look here. Yep, today is Palmer is the best city, Palmer, Alaska. So Palmer is about, I'd say about 40 minutes north of Anchorage. So a nice little small community out there. And this one was just talking, I think it was about Wasilla, but as you can see, Palmer is definitely the favorite of this individual. So Palmer is the best city. I live in Wasilla, used to live in Palmer, definitely going back. They are right next to one another, but it's Palmer all the way. Small town feel, unified, safe, direct line to Hatcher Pass as well, and direct line to Anchorage, Alaska, closer than Wasilla. So there you go. If you are considering moving to Alaska, definitely do consider giving Palmer a look, just because it does have all the things that were mentioned here. Now, let's go and finish up today's video talking about the things that you are going to be missing from Texas if you do move to Alaska, and I can speak kind of authoritatively on this topic. All right, so the first one, and this really isn't something you're missing, it's something you're gaining, but that is you're going to have to deal with snow and ice all of a sudden. And if you move up during the summertime, at least you'll have some phase where you can kind of get used to the weather, acclimate a little bit, and you kind of just slowly get to that point where you can get onto the road and get around the ice and everything. I lived up here in Alaska when I was younger, and then I moved back when I was an adult after having lived in Texas. So I didn't have to actually drive on the snow and ice a whole lot until I actually got up here. So that's something you're going to have to get used to pretty quickly, is driving on the snow and ice. All right, the second thing you're going to have to deal with when you get up here is you're going to have to hear a lot of jokes about Texas from Alaskans. And this is where you find out there is actually this one-way beef with Alaskans that have an issue with Texans. And it all comes down to the size of the state. You're going to hear this joke a million times, and that is, oh, well, we up here in Alaska, we should just cut Alaska in half and make Texas the third biggest state. And you're going to hear that joke a million times, and it's absolutely hilarious to me because it sounds like a rivalry, except, Texas doesn't realize we're even having this rivalry whatsoever. So that's fun. You got that to look forward to. All right, now this next one, you're going to probably miss this one, and this is you can't really drive very far compared to what you're used to. The road system in Texas is very well developed, and there's just so many different routes to get all these different places. And that's one of the things that I really do appreciate about the state, and that is just not the case here in Alaska. We've got a couple of really thoroughfare highways that we can use, and if for whatever reason those highways are down, that's it. At least if you're driving. Now you can get onto a small plane or maybe a boat. I don't know, it depends where you're at. But there's really less transportation options if you are in Alaska versus Texas. All right, Alaskans, don't shoot the messenger on this next one, but Texans actually have a much cooler history than we do. It is cool. It's got its own quirks and everything. And we, had the Battle of Attu from World War II that was fought out on the Aleutian Islands and everything. And there's a really cool cool history and everything with this state. But Texas has got the Alamo, it's got the Texas Rangers, it's got this whole aurora around it. And, that is just something that we just don't really have up here. So if that is something you take a lot of pride in as a Texan, that is just something you need to be aware of. We just don't have quite the level of swagger, at least historically in our history, as Texans do. And again, I know I'm going to catch a lot of heat from Alaskans for that, but don't shoot the messenger. Another thing you're going to have to really just come to peace with if you're a Texan coming to Alaska is there's just really no theme parks up here to speak of. We might have some rides at the state fair. We might have like some small local festivals where there'll be a couple of rides. But if you're someone who just really needs the roller coasters and that theme park atmosphere and the Sea Worlds and all that and the Schlitterbahn, Alaska may or may not be a good fit, at least in that specific area. Obviously, you can always go to Texas for those things specifically and forego all the negatives aspects of living in Texas that drove you to Alaska in the first place. But just be aware, no theme parks up here in Alaska. And you can understand why. If it's like negative 30 out, probably wouldn't want to be on a roller coaster. All right, last but definitely not least is that there is no Chick-fil-A and no Whataburger in Alaska. And this is something that, is near and dear to a lot of people's hearts up here. And every time you go to the lower 48, that is, you're going to probably be, if you're anything like me, you're going to be making some very intentional stops to eat as much Chick-fil-A as you can. I actually worked at Chick-fil-A myself for, I think it was about 5 or 6 years or so. So, it's got a lot of history there, and the food is definitely nostalgic for me. But I'm not the only one up here. You ask every other person, it seems like, and you tell them you're going out of state for a little bit, and that's one thing that they'll ask. And people will be jealous when you post on Facebook or Instagram that you are eating at Chick-fil-A or Whataburger. So this has been my video talking about whether or not, if you are from Texas, if you should move to Alaska. Is this going to be a good fit for you? I couldn't say for sure. The best thing I would say is keep jumping into all the videos we have available here on the channel and hear the stories from people who have recently come up here. A good portion of them have been from Texas. I don't have the percentages off the top of my head, but it is not uncommon for me to help Texans relocate up here to Alaska. And it's a great fit culturally. So is it a good idea for you to move to Alaska from Texas? Well, I couldn't say that for sure. That's going to be something you're going to have to figure out for yourself. And luckily, we have an entire library of resources here on the YouTube channel and the podcast where you can go ahead and hear from people directly who have made that move and hear the straight informational content that I have here on the channel as well for you. And that's going to help you to make the best decision that you possibly can. If you do decide to move up here, great. Feel free to give me a call and all that. And I think you're going to find there's a lot of things about Alaska that you really do enjoy and a lot of similarities between the two places. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.